with another version of Beach's Audio Adventures. We're all sitting here under lockdown around the country and around the world, wishing that we could be riding motorcycles on a regular and routine basis. Today, we've got, as normal, Mike Knott coming to us live from Thunder Bay, Ontario. Hi, Mike.
Hey, Robbie. It's a rainy day here in Thunder Bays. I've poured myself a nice coffee with some 40 Creek. Thought I'd sit down and we can enjoy at least talking about motorcycles.
Very good. And coming to us from the East Coast of America, we've got Karen Salemi. Hi, Karen.
Hey there, Rob. Hi, Mike.
Great to have you here and taking some time out of your busy day to talk to us and carry on about motorbikes.
Pleasure to be here because the weather hasn't been very nice lately. So just a few days that have been great for riding, and I've not really been out yet.
It's kind of interesting with the virus lockdowns and changes that when the weather's a little dodgy, we don't even bother to go out.
Well,
Karen, you've been riding for quite a while, haven't you?
about 15 years now.
How did
so
you
not
get involved
too
in the
long
first
the
place?
scheme of things. Well, you mean finally? I live in an area where back roads are a rider's dream to some degree. I mean, it's not the Alps or Northern California, but we do have a lot of pretty great riding here. I'm in North Massachusetts, about 45 miles north of Boston. And when I first moved here, everyone said, "Oh my God, you live in the middle of nowhere." I have actually been to the middle of nowhere. This is not it. But the population is a lot lighter. The roads are a lot less traveled. You would love the roads here. Tree-lined, curvy, stunning views, mountains all around. It's really pretty. And I moved here in April of 2002, and there are a lot of motorcyclists in this area. I live on kind of a busy street, so all day long, and I work from home, so all day long I'm listening and watching bikes go past the house. So finally in 2005, I just finally did it. But to take a step back in time, I actually took a permit test back when I was 18, and then the guy who was going to loan me his motorcycle to take the test never showed up, and I just kind of dropped it, got married a couple of times in between and everything. But fast forward 30 years and I'm watching all these people ride by, and I just decided to do it, took a class, and here we are.
Excellent. You do have some very nice roads in your area. Some great riding up there. There really is.
So was there a bunch of friends who were riding, or did you just think, I think I want to get into this?
No, I didn't have any friends at the time who were riding. It's funny, I went to regional school, so I never had friends that were local. When I moved up here, I was working from home and traveling a lot, so I didn't have any friends that were local. And for the first 5 years, believe it or not, I hardly did any riding at all. I put 325 miles on a motorcycle the first 5 years I had it. And it all changed when I bought a BMW.
Well, I get it. I know sometimes myself, if you had a friend call up and say, "Hey, it's a nice day. Why don't you drop whatever you're doing in the backyard or around the house? Come on, let's go out for an hour or two." And when you don't have that prod, sometimes it can be hard. You think at the end of the day, now it's supposed to rain tomorrow. I should have went out my bike. So I get it. Yeah. If you don't have someone to egg you along, like any other kind of activity.
Yeah, and it also, I think, has a lot to do with having the right bike. Because if you don't like
the
bike you have, you're not going to ride it.
For sure. I've seen that with many friends. They have still the full-on sport bike from yesterday when we all had them. A friend of mine still has his FZR 1000. It used to be mine. I bought an R1 and he still has it. And he says, "Geez, I really don't ride it much, like once a year barely." Well, yeah, because you're 30 years older and what used to be kind of comfortable is not anymore. And we're not out riding around like crazy mad like we used to. And so, like you said, go get something you think you will use, whether it's a dirt bike, a cruiser, whatever you're happy with. But a lot of people don't do that.
Yeah, and it's funny because I see a lot of women in these groups on Facebook, and I'm a new rider, what should I get? And so many people are like, "Oh, get this, get this, get this, get this." And a couple of friends and myself, we're all like, "Well, what kind of riding do you want to do? Where do you think you want to go?" Before you make a choice, go out and look at a lot of different things. I knew nothing. The closest motorcycle dealer was a Honda. I went there, I looked at a bike, I sat on it, feels good, bought it, decided I was not part of the cruiser crowd. Didn't like the seating position.
That's a big part of it. Probably the biggest part is, what kind of riding do you think you're going to do? Because if you buy a bike simply because you can touch the ground flat-footed, so you feel super comfortable, but maybe it doesn't have a windshield, and you thought you were going to ride on the highway lots, and maybe after doing that a bit, you think, geez, this is really beating me up. I wish I had a bloody windshield. Yeah, just simple things like that sometimes.
And the funny thing is, so I moved up here in 2002, and I think Max opened their first shop around that time. Within 2002 or 2003, I think they opened their first shop. And I met somebody who was interested in motorcycles. We took a ride out to Northampton, New Hampshire, and started looking at the bikes, and they had a 650, and Max's wife was working there at the time. And I just fell in love with the bike and somehow totally forgot all about it. But fast forward 5 years after I started riding, and I met somebody who had an 1150 GS. One day he's like, you should sell that thing and you should go buy a BMW. And that day put my bike up for consignment, went down to Max BMW and bought a 1200 GS.
Oh, that easy.
So to take that one step further, so the guy delivers the bike and he says, hey, are you looking for bags? And I hadn't even thought of luggage for the bike. And I'm like, yeah, sure. And he hooks me up with a guy down about an hour and a half from here. And I start talking to the guy, and he's involved with a group of people, a bunch of tech nerds who know each other. So this is back in 2010. And they know each other for like 20 years at this time or more. Because you know how computer guys, they all were doing email type of things long before the rest of the world. And so I start talking to this guy, and he mentions this group, and I joined this group, and it totally changed my life. These are the nicest people in the world. There is women right in my area, 5 miles from my house. We have the same riding styles. It's been wonderful, absolutely wonderful.
So you haven't been riding a ton of time, but a decent amount that maybe you could. Just wondering, do you find people treated you differently then compared to now as a female rider? When you go in to buy the bike, was it what you thought, or is it, or were they talking down? Or
so, okay, that is a great question, and you just made me think of something. So I was all set on a Harley, and so I go to the Harley dealer, right, and I want to buy the smallest one, the cheapest one they have, and the guy is trying to talk me into a lowrider. So now we're talking about going from like roughly a $6,000 bike to a $17,000 bike. And I looked at him and I said, I don't even have my license yet. Why are you trying to do this? And I walked out, and I didn't buy the bike there. Then I go to this Honda dealer, and looking back, anytime I've been there, no one ever walked up to me and asked me if I needed any help or anything like that. Yet I bought a bike from them. But I walk into Max, and people walk up to you, they start talking to you, and they pretty much treat everybody the same. Now, I don't know if the people at the Honda place just weren't into their jobs, or if they looked at me, well, it's a woman, so, because nobody talked to me, so I don't have any. But I thought the Harley guy was pretty funny, that he just immediately started talking me up into buying a more expensive motorcycle.
It may have been the size, it may have been his preconceived notions on what you should be riding. But can I back up for just a second, Karen? And you made the point of not knowing what kind of riding you would like to be doing before you go and buy your bike.
Right.
How can one figure that out? I mean, you were there watching these bikes go by the house, but you really don't know what's around the corner, quite literally. Until, you haven't gotten your license, you don't know what's around the corner, and you can only dream rather than relate to what it's like to go out and ride for 30 minutes or an hour or 6 hours. So if somebody is in that position and they're sitting back and thinking, I would really like to get involved with motorcycling, what's a sensible thing for them to do as a first step in order to be able to answer that question that you brought up? What kind of riding do you want to do?
Well, go out and buy something like a Rebel, something small. It's not particularly expensive. In this area, they're super easy to sell when you're done with it and you want to move on to something else. But get a small bike. The sitting style is not with your feet way out in front of you. That's the thing that got me on the bike I had. I just didn't like having my feet out in front of me. I knew I didn't want a sport bike. And in my head, what I thought I wanted was what's commonly referred to as UJM. But interestingly, that's not what I bought. And when I was 14, that's exactly the first bike that I ever rode, was that kind of bike. I have, a short leg issue where I can't touch the ground on a lot of bikes. So, so that's a little bit difficult to work with as well, which was part of the reason I bought the bike that I did. But I recommend that people get a small bike, that they practice their skills. They look around, they go to dealers, and they talk to as many people as they can. And today it's really easy with all of these groups on Facebook and all of these networking groups that you have online, Meetup and Nextdoor and everything. It's a great way to meet different people, talk about different riding styles, and get a better idea of what you might want to do.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And you're saying, Karen, about the smaller bike and cheaper bike for many reasons. One, of course, if you make some mistakes, which we often do when we're new riders, it's going to be cheaper to repair. I have some friends who are instructors at our motorcycle training course here in Thunder Bay, and they see it often. People, not to pick on a Harleys, but people really gravitate towards that brand, and their friends have one. So they think, yeah, I'm going to get one too, having never ridden a motorcycle. So they go out and buy a $20,000, $25,000 motorcycle before they really know if they really like this. And they make some mistakes, and that's not a cheap thing to repair, as opposed to, like you said, you get something small, manageable, something that you're not going to bust your Visa card if it falls over. And then the other part is, a good point you made was, if it's a smaller bike, it's easier to sell. So you decide you want to keep it for another year or two, that's great. If you decide, yeah, I think I want to change the style, the size, whatever factors involved, it's easier to sell a smaller bike. Around this area, insurance can be fairly expensive for bigger bikes, which limits your market to who you can sell it to. A smaller bike, anybody can insure, they're affordable.
And if you drop it, it's way easier to pick up.
Yep. And you will.
And you will. I look at women when I take my bike to inspection who roll in on these giant bikes that are, 700 pounds. And I'm like, never in 100 years.
Well, it's certainly a common theme that I've heard with female riders who are traveling around the world. Number one priority is, can I pick this bike up on my own? Because I'm going to be in places where I will be by myself, at the very least for hours, and I don't want to have to sit there and hope somebody comes to rescue me. You should be able to rescue yourself.
The 700, when I've got that bike fully loaded, it's not a joy to pick up, and I've had to.
So is that what you're riding these days, the 700?
One of them. I actually just picked up a fifth bike. Although actually I bought it, I haven't picked it up yet because of everything that's going on. But this is the bike that I have the most mileage on right now. I've got over 40,000 miles on it. It's a 2015. This is the bike that I've taken round trip across the country. I have a 650 single, which is my beater bike, so to speak. And it's the one that I take on dirt roads if I'm going to do any kind of dirt riding where it's not going to be too heavy if I drop it. And then I have a 1200R, which is one of my newer bikes, and I've got the least amount of mileage on that, but that's my pretty bike. So.
What year is the 1200R?
16.
Oh, okay.
Fun bike.
Yeah, it is a fun bike, and one that I was debating whether or not I should take on the tour when I was with you guys, because you had such great options on bikes. And then I stayed with what I was most comfortable with at home rather than trying something new, because I knew that we were going to be on technical roads, and I wanted to know that. I wanted to feel more comfortable on a bike. So
I didn't really like the older version of the 1200R, just seating position. That was the only thing, but it might have been, I think it might have had a low seat on it. I just couldn't seem to get my body position where I liked it. But last time I was in Europe, rode the 1250R and just loved it. Just loved it, especially for the riding that's there. Great handling. You get rid of the tail lever front suspension. People have mixed opinions about it. It's kind of nice to pick up a normal telescopic fork. It kind of gives you a little bit better feedback. And my wife was quite comfortable on it also. So she seemed to prefer it, actually.
Yeah, I like it. I've got to be careful with the throttle. I'll just say that. For me, I'm not the kind of person, I've never gone more than 99 on a bike, and it was the 700. And that one, when you twist it a little bit, it just wants to go, and I'm inclined to let it. So I got to be really careful.
Well, yeah, you just make sure that you ride in places that are challenging enough at slower speeds that you're using it. Yeah. And that's also where the police don't go. They don't bother on the little quiet roads. That's a nice thing.
Yeah, there's no place for them to hide on a lot of the little quiet roads.
Right.
They're too small.
So with your getting acquainted with the folks at Max's, and the group of riders with your computer group, does it make sense to send somebody out on their little bike with the mission of going to dealers around the area and finding out where the riders are and where the good shops are and where the receptive groups are? Or is it better to try that stuff online and from the comfort of your couch?
I'm not sure how to answer that question. So I fell into this group, and these really are the nicest people, and they're extremely supportive people. And some of these people, they're racers, or they do trials riding, or they're MSF instructors. Everybody's a, ride your own ride kind of thing. And they're all just super, super, super supportive. And I think it's hard to find people for your own tribe kind of a thing. And I really don't know the best way to make that happen. As an introvert who's shy, I'm not the kind of person that goes up and starts talking to people. I see, people with a bike. If it's like mine, like today, I might go up and talk to them. But in the past, I never would just walk up to somebody and start talking to them about their motorcycle. Maybe if it was a woman, but there aren't really that many women, and certainly I'm not going to walk up to anybody who, and this is really horrible to say, and I know people do it to me, but I really reluctant to walk up to people who look like they don't want you to walk up to them and start talking to them.
Yeah. No, that's all.
Call it RBF, call it, I don't know what it is, but like a lot of people have said to me that I'm unapproachable. And I know I have a closed look a lot of times because people freak me out sometimes. So it's hard to just, for some people, it's really hard to meet people. So going into like a Facebook group where people are having conversations, you can kind of get a feel for who you might have something in common with, whether it's riding style or other interests. It could be location related. I see a lot of posts where people are like, oh, I'm riding with this group and oh my God, it was awful. And the guys were all like, what's wrong with you? And this, and I would never want to be part of a group like that, so I'm going to stay away from those guys. I also tend to shy away from riding with people that don't play by the rules or don't know what they're doing or don't care about what they're doing. I think I'm getting off track on the question here. But it's hard to figure any of that out unless you actually go ride with somebody and actually meet people.
Yeah. And that's kind of the point of the question is what's the easiest way to actually meet the people. And the points that you have on not walking up to folk and talking to them are real for everybody, for all of the introverts. I mean, there's Mike, and Mike will talk to anybody. I've watched him talk to rocks on the side of the road, and I realize it's just because he's got these voices running around in his head all the time and he has to let them out.
That's somewhat accurate.
But I get it. It's difficult to find a group of people that are interesting to be around and make you feel confident to be riding with them. That's definitely a problem everywhere.
I did a tour. Well, I did a ride across the country with a group of people back in 2016, and it was 95% women. And I was very naive and thought because it was women that it was going to be extremely supportive. And there were two people that just kept getting in my head the whole time. Why are you riding that bike? That bike is too big for you. I had 8,000 miles on the bike, never had a problem. Halfway through the trip, I'm dropping the bike once a day. They just really got into my head. I don't really need to be riding with people like that. Like I said, I thought it was going to be a really supportive group, and it wasn't. And I mean, it got to the point where I dropped the bike and no one asked me even if I was okay afterward. And that just, I just wanted to go home, but you can't do that in the middle of the thing, right? So sometimes it's hard, but you just pick yourself up and you keep going.
That's almost like the, I don't know, I would say discrimination. You form this point of view of, well, I'm with these lovely women, it's going to be so great. But we don't know that, of course. You think it's going to be. And, back to making judgments. Well, if there's a bunch of guys, maybe they'd be dicks or something. Whereas these women are it's going to be, to be doing yoga in the morning. And yeah, people, good and bad people come in all shapes and sizes.
Then again, I was on a tour in Europe with somebody who went with me. And when I dropped the bike, he didn't even get off his. Somebody else's husband got off their bike and helped me pick the bike. So it's, doesn't matter who or where, right? It crosses all over. People are people.
And it's a difficult situation to handle. I know we were on tour one time. We had this woman riding a 1200R, and it was her very first day. And you could tell she was super nervous. I was following behind her, and you want to be supportive without seeming like you're doubting them. But and I came up beside her and said, "You've got this. You seem really nervous." I said, "Just try and relax. Make sure, lift your head, look through the corner. You got this, no problem." And let her go. And by the end of the day, she was getting more comfortable. But I think maybe there's some added pressure when you're the female rider, no one else is. I don't know if do you feel that at all? It's like if I fall down, then I'm ruining it for all women, all womankind.
Well, I don't quite feel that way, but you made a great point. And by taking 5 seconds to say something like that goes a long way. And there was one woman on the trip, and she was working with the organizer of the trip, and she's like, "Don't worry about it. Don't let it get to you. You're good. You got this." And it really did go a long way. I've not ever been the only woman on the tour, but usually I'm the only solo woman on a tour, which always kind of makes me feel a little weird because the whole couples thing, and sometimes there's guys there that are solo, and so that to me makes it a little bit easier because I'm like, okay, there's another person who's here by themselves, maybe we so I'm not the only one. And I have found, maybe because most of the people on a lot of these tours are 10 years, give or take, of my age on either side, that they're all gentlemen and they're all helpful in a way that's not demeaning or making you feel stupid. I think that in that type of situation, men are generally nicer sometimes than women. Women could be more catty, not all the time. Obviously, and I don't know what prompts that, but it's really nice when you're someplace and you're by yourself and you don't know anyone, but you feel like you're being taken care of.
I think often for people when they're making people feel worse about themselves or pointing out your mistakes as opposed to the positives, it's a way of them making themselves feel better or look better. If I'm not the greatest rider, but I can point out how bad you are, well, I'm better than you. No. I think that's where a lot of that comes from.
Yeah, that was this one person on the trip I mentioned earlier. So the first tour I took in Europe, which I didn't know at first, was a guy who was an ex-racer. And I believe he had actually won the tour, or his wife had won the tour at the rally, the previous BMW rally. Anyway, one day, we're sitting around and no one's talking, and I'm like, "So tell me, what's your favorite part of the trip?" And so now I'm going to get emotional because the guy said, "Watching you progress on this trip and watching you get better." But I'm a firm believer that when you ride, when you do anything with people who are better than you and you have enough knowledge to know that they're doing the right thing, you learn from them. If you're paying attention, you could learn from them. Now, I could never keep up with Rob on a tour, blink of an eye, and he's like, 300 yards down the road, Gretchen waving her arms like, "Wee," right? Or taking pictures. And, and I'm, watching my line and doing everything. But when you follow people who are good, you can learn so much and improve your skills. If you take the tour in October and then you come back to the Northeast, you're not going to have a lot of time to practice. But I still, from the tour I took with you guys, have Ken Condon's voice in my head telling me to follow this line and to do this. And, and I just keep, even when I'm in the car, I do that. Playing with people who are better than you is always a good thing. But when that man said that, it just really kind of got to me.
Isn't that amazing? Just those few words, and you still remember them, and probably made you feel so great. There's only a few words. So it shows you how powerful words are too.
Yeah.
So, that's part of that too, riding with a better rider. Yeah, you can pick up lots as long as your mind is open. And I'm sure we all know people that it wouldn't work so much, but you go in there not trying to measure yourself against them. Go in thinking this guy or girl is a really good rider. What is it they're doing? They seem to, I often say that about following Rob in the hairpins, the slow hairpins. That's where I seem to have the most trouble, is he seems to get in and out of them so well. And it's like, I'm still not exactly sure what he does better than me, but he certainly does do a few things. Still work in progress. But that's great.
I've had the opportunity to do a few million more of them than you have, Mike.
Multiply that by 1,000 for me.
Yeah.
Interesting scenario where often as motorcyclists, especially motorcyclists that play locally and don't actually get out and travel into different areas and come up with different scenarios in front of them that are unfamiliar, is that we don't have the opportunity to learn how to do things without traveling with someone who's better. And the problem for many people is that the roads are such that they're not challenging. You know, you've got some really nice riding where you are, but down here where we are in Western New York, the riding's not particularly good. And there's very little here that's at all challenging to a rider. That's a bit of a dilemma for many people. And Mike is out in the middle of the big flats, and he's got a similar situation. He's got to ride many hundreds of miles before he comes up with any series of corners that's interesting, much less challenging.
Yeah, I remember being rode last time we went to Elkhart Lake, Road America, and I'd read about this great road in Wisconsin. I don't remember the highway number, but they called it the Dragon of the North. I was pretty sure I was on it. Well, it was somewhat challenging, but I was doing about 90 miles an hour. I thought, wow, okay, this is relatively fun, but hopefully there's not a police officer on the corner, because the speeds are starting to really get up there. It's like, this is okay, but like you say, Rob, it's tough. It's tough where we live, for sure. Karen, let me ask you about gear, because this is a common complaint I know with female riders and passengers. It was tough to find gear for Bonnie before. It seems like the choices are better now. There's female-specific lines for certain brands. The cuts are better. The cut of the jacket, so for people actually have hips and things like that. How have you found it, finding gear?
It's hard to find good gear. And of course, good gear is going to cost money. You know, it's funny, when I took the MSF class, it was behind a store that only sold gear, motorcycle gear. I remember walking into that store thinking, never in 100 years am I going to pay this kind of money for clothes to ride a motorcycle. And then if you saw how much I have now, you would just laugh your butt off. I started out with First Gear, and they do have women's gear, and it's pretty good gear, and it has all the right armor in it. I'm not sure there's a way to really make a jacket that doesn't make you look like a potato sack, but they're trying. Some of them are trying. So I have that, and I had their overpants, and then I kind of gravitated towards BMW gear, and they have some gear that's branded for women, but I'm not really sure that it's cut for women. Though I have to say, the slacks I have, the pants, fit pretty well. Now I have a 28-inch inseam, and they're a little long, but it's not really a problem. I have a friend, and she's got a 36-inch inseam, and it is impossible for her to find pants for more than, I think, Rebbit.
Oh, yeah, that'd be tough for a guy.
Yeah, and she's got long arms. So, and I'm longer in the torso, so I like a longer jacket. I have tried on some Climb gear, and the jackets fit great. The pants, not so much. And I'm a little bit older, but I still have a waist to go along with my hips, and it's as if they're cut for men. They're just kind of straight. So it's still hard. I think a lot of manufacturers are trying to work on it, and I think Climb has come a long way, probably more so than some of the other more expensive brands.
I was going to mention Climb just because that's what we got for Bonnie. And like you said, the pants, the waist, she has a very, very narrow waist, and so she's swimming in them a little bit. The jacket's great. Actually, interesting story. When they first came out with their women's line, the rep came here, and she needed a small or extra small jacket. Can't remember what it was. We couldn't find one anywhere in North America. So the next year, the rep came to town here, and we said that about how hard it was to find. He said, well, that's when they just got into women's gear. He said, we made equal amounts of small, medium, large, extra large. And what we quickly learned was people are generally more small, medium, maybe a large, will wear our gear. They're riding more BMWs or adventure touring bikes, and not all of them, but many. The ones who tend to be more large, extra large, don't wear our gear because they tend to ride cruisers, and they want leather, they want whatever. He said, so the next year we made way more smalls and mediums and way less larges and extra larges, which was kind of nice to see they were learning also at the same time.
Yeah, it's just, here the big question is, and I imagine it's the same almost everywhere, is no one really carries gear. And people are always asking, where can I go to try on gear? And if you want better gear, there really isn't a place here to go. There is a cycle gear store not too far from me, and they have built gear, but I've never really heard people say great things about it. It works in a pinch. If you don't have money, it's probably way better than nothing. If I go to Max, they have limited gear, but they'll order anything for you to try it on. So that's great, but better if you call them a week before you want to go look for gear and say, hey, can you get this for me? I'd like to try it on.
Yeah.
So you're not, wasting your time. Now, when they do their climb pop-ups, they do have a really good selection of women's gear.
Yeah, the other one is Aero Stitch also, because they can custom make anything. And actually, the great thing about them also is they'll repair. They can repair all their gear. They repair other gear sometimes. But so that's an option too for anyone of unusual proportions.
Yeah, they advertise women's gear, but you still really do look like a potato sack in it.
Yeah, it doesn't really. Theirs doesn't really seem like women's. It's just it's roughly the same thing.
But
Karen, the other side of that is that there are a whole group of men that are wandering around looking like potato sacks too. So there is
true.
the reality of this is the stuff we're putting on us, and it's really hard to make it look like anything but a potato sack. I mean, come on, how many ladies do you see at the Met with body armor on their nylons? Got a nice short skirt, and I've got my knee pads here, and my elbow pads and shoulder pads, and but I'm not looking like a potato sack.
Fair point. And it is all for safety. It is all for safety, right? But the good news is that, not all women's gear is pink anymore, right? So there's a lot of people that are like, oh my God, what's with all the pink gear? I like pink butt. And, so it's good. And, there's a lot of positive things about Aero Stitch, and I do own some Aero Stitch products that I wear while I'm riding, just not one of their one-piece suits. They do last forever. I mean, I know, as you probably do, people that have had their Stitch suits for over 20 years.
Mm-hmm. I've got one that's about 15 years old. Yeah, it performs great. But funny you should say about the pink. That's what they used to do, all the brands, right? Same gear, make it pink, put a flower on it. Here's our women's line.
So you mentioned safety, and the reason that we're wearing the gear is safety, but that's not the only reason. The other reason is because it makes the ride far more comfortable. And I think it's worth you mentioning again how your gear has expanded and how your first reaction of walking into the shop and looking at the gear and saying, I'm not spending that much for motorcycling gear, has changed tremendously, because you could probably save some people some huge missteps by them walking in and saying, I'm not going to buy good gear right now. Well, that certainly limits the riding that you can do, and it limits the possibilities down the road. It's worth spending money on gear versus the motorcycle. Your bike recommendations were great, but the next step is buy good gear, and buy really good gear right away.
Well, yeah, absolutely. So if I didn't have good gear, I wouldn't ride when it's cold. I wouldn't ride in the rain. And you're in the Northeast too. I mean, there's lots of days I'd look out the window and say, no freaking way am I going to go outside and ride in this. Eventually I picked up a heated vest, which I prefer over the jacket just because I don't like my arms to be constrained in there. And it extends the riding time immeasurably. It's just good gear. You really can't go wrong with having good gear. And if you buy good gear, it's going to last you a long time, as we were just talking about with the Aero Stitch.
Right.
And
money well
they're
spent.
Obviously not the only brand.
Well, we all often say that about buying tools. You buy a good tool, the battery powered stuff is a little different these days, but you buy a good skill saw or table saw, you'll probably only buy the one for most people. Well, the gear is the tool for riding. You buy good stuff, it'll last you a long time, unless it kind of kisses the pavement, but that's a different situation. But, another thing too is if it fits you properly, you generally need less other clothing. So if your jacket doesn't fit you properly, you maybe have to pack an extra sweater or something because the air infiltrates it and you're just not warm. Whereas if you get something that fits you and seals out the elements, you'll be more comfortable. It's more room for whatever else.
Yeah. And, something that I think is fairly new is the large amount of denim riding pants for people who just have to wear jeans. They want to look chic or whatever their thing is, but they want to wear jeans. And there's a nice variety of jean motorcycle wear that has armor and Kevlar and all that, and looks decent and fits well. So people can sort of have their cake and eat it too. And the price line is a lot better than, say, buying Climb or BMW gear or anything else that might be, or Aero Stitch, right? Instead of $600 for a pair of slacks, it's, $200. And they work, and they protect you from the rain, and they keep you warm.
Especially for that that trip you're going to the grocery store to grab a few things. Yeah, I'm not going gear all up. I always wear my jacket. We have helmet laws. I'd wear my helmet generally anyways. So, but I always wear my jeans. I don't do the shorts and sandals, except that time in Portugal. I'll tell that story another day. But yeah, so if I had a pair of jeans that were tougher, yeah, throw those on just in case.
I put jeans on to go to the grocery store. Like the only time I didn't wear gear going out, the grocery store is a mile away. And I got out of my driveway and I got down to the corner, which is a half mile. And I was like, it's cold in jeans, man.
Well, I always say that about riding with a t-shirt and or shorts, whatever. I've said to people, the air is fairly dirty. If you look at your windshield, even on a normal day, it picks up sand and dirt. And depending on the humidity of the day, your skin tends to get a little bit tacky because the temperature difference when you get to speed. So you get back and your skin is dirty from the dirt just flying in the air. I don't think people quite understand that. Never mind crashing or bugs or whatever else.
Part of the experience was the answer I got once. Just part of the experience. Okay. Better you than me.
Yeah, exactly.
We talked about touring and you going by yourself. What kind of advice would you have for a single female thinking about going on a tour? She's by herself. Is it just go or, that's always good advice, but.
Do it. Just do it. Really. A long time ago, somebody said to me, if there's a restaurant that you want to go to, just go. Don't wait for somebody to ask you, because if you wait, you may never get there. And that's really a great way to deal with life. Whatever it is that you want to do, don't wait for somebody else. Do your research, make your plans, and go. And do it sooner rather than later, because tomorrow is promised to nobody. And if you think about all of the wonderful people that you would never meet, or the beauty that you would never see, the places that you would never go because you're sitting home waiting for somebody to ask you or somebody to go with, just do it and you'll be glad that you did. Something that you guys talked about on the last episode was all of the planning that goes into doing the trips. This is great. I don't have to look for hotels. I don't have to figure out who I'm going to eat with. I don't have to figure out who I'm going to ride with. And one of the great things about your tours, Rob and Gretchen, is that not only do you provide a GPS with the route for the day, you provide multiple routes for each day. I don't think there was a day on that trip that I took with you guys that had less than 3 choices. And you provided an itinerary that described the different places you would go through and the different tourist spots that you could see. So there were all of these choices. I mean, can you think of anything better if you are afraid to just go out solo? Some woman just posted on, I think it was a Women Adventure Riders page, that she just finished a 5 or 6 year around the world 200,000 mile trip by herself. God bless her. If I only had the fortitude to do that. But for as adventurous as my friends think I am, I'm kind of a wimp. I'm letting you guys do all the work. I know how hard it is to do routes. I've tried working in base camp to put together a route. My way of doing a route is taking a really nice ride, importing it into base camp, and then fixing all the U-turns and coming up with a route after that. You know, if that's...
And you think I'm doing anything different?
Right? So, I mean, just do it because somebody else is doing all the planning. All you have to do is go with a good mindset and enjoy all of the fabulous work that somebody else has done for you.
Yeah, the very mindset and knowing that you're going on a tour with whatever be 8, 10, 20 people, depending on the size, but you all have something in common. It's the motorcycling. We've probably all met a fair amount of friends just from that, because you have that commonality amongst you. So, at supper time, like you said, there would be a group of people you have at the very least that to talk about and the day you just had.
Yeah. And you can socialize as much as you want to. If you want to lay back, you can lay back. No one judges. If you want to socialize more, you have the opportunity to do it. If you're solo, it's one of the best ways to go traveling.
Hey, and if you're interested, there's been the odd woman who's met a husband on one of these tours. So
you're saying there's still hope.
There's still hope, yeah.
The scenario that I see in front of me on the first day or 2 or 3 of a tour is always interesting, because the riders that are new to wherever we're going, or particularly the riders who are new to international travel, have underlying the surface a level of concern and a level of anxiety about what's coming. Do I have the skill and ability to deal with this? What about all these people around me? I don't want to be the first guy to drop a motorcycle. Am I looking cool when I'm in the parking lot? I mean, these are the things that guys think about. And it is an issue at the beginning of every tour. It's not something that people talk about, but it's there. I see it and I understand it. And I have to keep that in mind as I'm talking to people and dealing with people, that everybody's a little nervous. Everybody's a little worried. Do you find that to be the same situation as well? And is it more or less because of the mix of the people around you? How does that change?
Of all the things that you said when you first started, the only thing I don't worry about is looking cool, because it's just not going to happen, right? Other than, like an old lady, on a motorcycle trip by herself, which some people think is really cool. But I do worry about that. I do worry about being the least experienced person on the tour. I worry about, are people going to talk to me? Because I mentioned earlier, I have a fear that it's just going to be all couples, or that as an older person, an older female, that people are just going to discount me, and not talk to me. I don't worry so much about dropping the bike, but I do worry about that as well. But it doesn't bother me, because I have, in the last few years, learned that it is okay to ask for help.
Yep. And it's okay to drop your bike when you can't hold it up, because mean old Mr. Gravity is all powerful.
I don't feel comfortable parking here. I'm going to need help, or I'm going to need help to move the bike when we get out of here. That kind of thing. I was on a tour where the guide got lost. We were on a cobblestone street, parked on an uphill, and my bike had a idle issue. And I started the bike and it popped and it fell. The shifter bent, the clutch lever broke, and the guide, and I could not believe this, turned around and looked at me and he said, "I thought you rode this kind of bike at home." I said, "I would never be stupid enough to park in a place like this." Which I wouldn't have said had he been nicer to me, perhaps. But yeah, I mean, it's great to have people there to help on the tour. And I've learned that it's no great shakes. It's not an embarrassment to ask for help, that it's the right thing to do.
So on that kind of line, I guess, do you find that it's different at all in Europe compared to North America? Being a single female rider, is it roughly the same? We're somewhat insulated by the fact if you're in a group or a guide, but not always. We tend to get off on our own little adventures on tour.
I have never been by myself in Europe. I've always been on a tour, so I've always had a bunch of people around me. Something that happened to me in the US, this totally surprised me. I had just gone over the Golden Gate Bridge. I was on my way to where I was leaving my bike for a few months to a friend's house in Mill Valley or something. And I think I was coming off, and not before, but you're going around this curve, and the street is really banked, and it's stop and go, stop and go, stop and go. And it's windy, and I dropped the bike, probably looked down, right? I dropped the bike, and I can get it up. Not one car stops. They're just going around. I got places to go. People do things to see, right? They're just going around. Finally, two guys, they come and they get the bike up. They put it up on the side stand, but I still can't. Those bags are loaded. I still can't get it up.
Get it off the side stand.
Some lady, she's like next to me, and I said, "Hey," because traffic is moving really slow. She looks at me. She's like, "Are you okay?" I said, "Can you help me?" So she pulls over and she says, "What do you want me to do?" And I said, "Just push my shoulder till I can get the bike up and get going." And she did. And I'm like, "Thanks." And I just took off, like leaving her there. But I think that's unusual for that. And like I said, the people that I know and the people that I ride with, everybody watches out for each other. It's such a good group of people. The guys are all gentlemanly. The women that have been riding, there's one person that I ride with all the time, and she's always, "Do you want me to move your bike for you? I'll be happy to move your bike for you." This is a person I mentioned earlier. She can get the tallest bike out there and flat-footed. She's been riding for 25 years. She works on bikes. She does everything, right? And it's great to ride with people like that. I can't say that I really had a negative experience other than that one that I mentioned earlier. with riding. I have not had experiences where people look at me as a motorcyclist, female or otherwise, and have, given me the evil eye because motorcycles or anything like that. Maybe I've just been really lucky. Maybe it's because I started when I was older. I was 48 when I got my license. I don't know.
Partly times have changed. I know I've been more, riding a bike since I was 16, dirt bikes before that. And the way traffic reacts with us and everything is totally changed. People are, you think about our social norms from 40 years ago were in a lot of ways completely different than now. And so things like that it's not anything crazy back then. You're in some towns, you'd be thinking, oh, well, what the heck's going on with this person riding a motorcycle? Now it's not a big deal. But, you talk about dropping the bike, and that's certainly not just a female thing. It's generally just a smaller person problem. I've been on tour, and there's a couple people who are like smaller, a little bit older, and I would often move their bike for them. They'd be in a tough spot and they're riding a bike, and it's just easier for me. Hey, how about I yank that out of the way for you and get lined up? And they always appreciate it. Just, when you're a little bit lower to the ground, it makes some things more difficult. Some other things easier, but that's not one of them.
I've done several classes with Ken here. One was a dual sport class, and in the morning class alone, I had dropped my bike 3 times. And every time he just came over and picked it up. And I think it was the 4th time, I forget what drill we were doing. I just got so disgusted with myself. I just threw the bike down. But every time, Ken was there. He's like, no, don't you do it. You'll get too tired doing it, and he picked it up for me. God bless him, right? It was great. It was a good class, despite the fact that I kept having problems with it. But nice that he was there saying, you don't worry about picking up the bike. But my bike tag is haha. So even my bike laughs at me when I have bad days.
Well, you're taking things seriously enough that you're off enjoying the courses and challenging yourself with the courses, and taking it not seriously enough that when your bike is laying there on the side, it's not the end of the world.
Not a long time ago.
Many of us could benefit from not having our blood pressure go up when the bike's laying there.
I've often said that one of the differences when men or women are learning to ride, that basic fact that we'll both make the same mistake. Usually it's just because I'm a little bit stronger, the bike doesn't touch the ground. I'm able to save it as it's tipping over. I put 150% into making sure that bloody thing doesn't touch the ground and save my ego. With females, often you just don't have the strength. So we both made the same mistake. I was able to hide it.
And I broke my leg, so in my driveway.
Yep.
Oh, I could pick this sucker up. Yeah, no, just let it go and move out of the way.
Yep.
Rob and I both often say that if it has to go down, let it go. But try, if you can, slow it down, because then you won't break a clutch lever possibly, or bend the shift lever. You won't strand yourself somewhere. But if you can, let it go, kind of controlled, walk away. The good thing about BMWs is they only fall over so far. Well, if it has a boxer motor.
If it's a boxer, yeah.
Pet peeves. Any pet peeves?
Oh, well, people that don't play by the rules. If you're in a group and people they ride recklessly, hoon about, or if you're with a group of, I don't know, more than 3 or 4 people, and people just kind of ride wherever they want to ride, pass people when they shouldn't be passing, that kind of stuff. Really safety issues kind of bother me. But otherwise, I'm just going to ride my own ride, or try to ride my own ride, and ignore the stuff that other people are pulling. But sometimes it's hard to ignore people when they're not riding safely.
Yeah, a bit of a pet peeve of mine.
Yeah, on one of the tours I was on, there were these 3 people who were related, and the youngest one was probably at the minimum age where you could actually rent and ride a motorcycle on a tour. And every day we'd start and they'd be like the laggards. But as soon as we got on the road, man, they would just pass everybody, go right up to the front. And then one day the kid crashed the bike, going around a corner too fast. So it was, that took a couple hours out of the day because they had to wait for the EMT people to come. And
we were on a ride one time with a bunch of bikes, and we had a new guy in the group and didn't know much about him. Nice enough guy. We hung out at that point for a while, and so we all go for a ride. He's got a GSXR 1100, where I have whatever, my R1. And going down this road, there's a farmer and an old tractor. He's going down the road, and we went by him, and then that guy in the GSXR, the new guy, couldn't make the turn. It wasn't that hard a turn, but he did whatever, panicked, target fixated, rode off the road, and real slow speed at that point. Bike just fell over, so we all stopped, turned around. We're picking the bike up. The tractor went by. He went by. He's looking at us. We get him picked up, dusted off. He scratched the bottom part of his frame a little bit. No problem. Okay, let's go. Away we went again. And we all went flying past him again. I thought, if he doesn't make the next turn, I am not stopping, because this farmer, I think I'll just get off and just hoof us in the butt. I don't know. And rightfully so, maybe.
He's probably thinking, how many times are we going to do this?
Yes.
Play hopscotch here.
Bunch of dumb young punks. Jesus. Yeah. Because you almost want to stop to ask him what he was thinking. If you could only read his mind, it was kind of funny. But
what do you find different touring in North America versus touring in Europe? What are the things that come to mind right away as far as the big things?
I've only taken one tour in North America with a group. I mean, I've done touring on my own, and because it's on my own, then of course I have to do all the planning. Although my friend and I, we went up to Nova Scotia for her 40th birthday, and we just basically winged it. It was a camping trip, and we made a deal before we left that either one of us could call a hotel night, no questions asked. And the only night we did that happened to actually be her birthday, because it was pouring like a son of a gun. And we ended up with this really nice Airbnb place. But yeah, we were just winging it. I mean, it's easier because you speak the language. There's a great website called newenglandriders.org, and they have routes for a variety of areas from Maine out to Ohio. And I think they might have routes going down to West Virginia if you're interested in something like that and not looking to do things on your own. But a lot of times when I do trips here, for example, I was supposed to be leaving tomorrow to go down to Little Switzerland, North Carolina. And I've already mentioned that I'm kind of lazy about doing routes, and I am fortunate that I have a couple of people that are really great at doing routes, and they have some from up here down to there. So I was already, what do you have to share? And are you looking for somebody to join you in going down there? And it's nice because these guys, they're all backroads riders, but you got to be careful with some of them because, for example, last year when I went down to West Virginia on a trip, I was riding with a guy and he gives me the route and I said, oh, so it should take us about 8 hours. He says, no, my GPS says 6.5 hours. So I just laughed because Dave would keep up with you, Rob, but like I said earlier, that's not me. It's just not, on the straightaways, fine. But when we're doing decreasing radius turns and all these tight little twisty roads, I just don't have the skills to do those like you guys do, right? And so it didn't take us 8 hours, but it took us way more than 6.5 hours
6.5,
to get there. But, you know, and I said to him that I don't think you really expected that extra time. And he said, no, I didn't. He said, but, you know, next time I'll just make adjustments for that. So certainly he didn't count me out as a companion, you know, for the next ride down. And his wife was thrilled that he wasn't on his own the whole time going down there. So that's great. So I do have, with this particular group of people that I mentioned, they have 4 or 5 trips a year, well, weekend things, and you get there on your own and you don't have to do any group riding when you're there. But it's a really nice way to stay in touch. It's a really nice way to get to see the area. And if you know what the destination is, it makes it a little bit easier to figure out how to get there and where to stay. So it's not the same as going to a place where you don't speak the language and you're not sure where there's a good, you know, where the good hotels are, where you can get some food, where you're staying and that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's great that you've got a good group of people to ride with and enjoy motorcycling with. That's special because we've got a good active BMW club here in Western New York now, thanks to the efforts of the current president, who will never be voted out of office because he's the one that keeps things going. But that was a club that my father was involved with 4 decades ago, and
Oh, that's awesome.
but for a good 15 years, it was nearly dead. There were no meetings, there was nothing going on, and there are too many places in the country that have that scenario rather than that cool group of people to travel with. There are too many places where there just isn't a group of people that are worth getting together, or haven't organized into something that's routinely and regularly happening, and that's a big shame.
Yeah, I have mentioned this so many times, but I really am fortunate. But this weekend canceled because of everything that's going on. Probably the one that was scheduled 2 weeks from now is going to be canceled. I'm still trying to figure out if I can rejoin your group in August.
Yeah, we're figuring out whether or not we're going to be there. I mean, nothing's clear yet.
Right. Yeah.
Clear.
I'll be with you guys again, though, at some point.
Good. Looking forward to that. What advice do you have for other women, particularly, who are waiting for that friend to go on tour?
It's easy to talk yourself out of doing something, so just make the decision and do it. When I did that ride across the country, I made the decision 3 days before the ride.
Mm-hmm.
I was doing a parking lot class with Ken, and it was specifically for women doing that ride. And I met them, and they all seemed like nice people. And I was like, oh my God, is there room? I got to do this,
Mm-hmm.
and I went. I didn't join your tour at the last minute, but listening to Ken and Bob Lesson and a few other people that have taken your tours who all have super things to say about, you guys have a really good reputation. And, so I decided to do that one sort of on the cuff. And it's just like, you just have to do it. You can't sit and wait. If you're going to wait for somebody to go with you, then you're just going to miss out. You're going to miss out on meeting really great people. You're going to miss out on seeing wonderful places. I keep thinking of that. I don't remember the name because all these Italian names, but the one place we stayed on the Tuscany tour, we were there for, I think, 3 days, that little village that was all self-enclosed, and they took care of all the dogs and cats and everything.
Oh,
and we had a rest day there.
Mm-hmm.
That was such a beautiful place to stay. And I met the ice cream shop owner, the gelato owner, who was so proud of his Harley club that he was in. He had to show me all of his paraphernalia from the club, and he put on his jacket. I mean, those are all the little things that you would miss out on because you're waiting for somebody. And who's to say that if you went with that person that you would have as good of a time? I mean, maybe you would have a better time because it's somebody that you know.
But that's the unknown. Yeah.
But sometimes you just have to get out of your shell and do it, and not talk yourself out of it, because there's so much to see and so many wonderful people out there that you just have to do it. You'll be glad you did.
And I think that's good advice for us, certainly not just for women, but for anybody. I often tell people that if I'm doing a little spiel about our tours is, just go with whoever, hopefully with beaches, but go and don't wait for your friends, because things pop up. Life has a habit of getting in the way. And especially, like you had said earlier, a lot of the people are a little bit older, so health issues pop up. It doesn't mean they can never go, but okay, this year, all of a sudden I need a hip or a knee, or I got to get something done. I can't go for another year or so, which puts you off another year. This is something you want to do. Pick a date, a year from now, 6 months from now, 3 years from now. That's when I'm going. Work towards it and go. And then like you said too, it's funny with friends, we've learned through experience. We have several friends we don't want to travel with. They're very nice people. We hang out for all night and everything, but no, just spend a week with them. No, that's way too much.
So I'm semi-retired. I work 5 hours a week and I do some teaching, which is 3 weeks a year. And fortunately my next class isn't until October, but who knows what's going to happen there. When I semi-retired, I had this sort of dream to travel around the world. I've got hotel points. I've got enough airline miles that I could travel for a while, and the only money coming out of my pocket would be for food. And then I got 2 cats. I thought of a lot of things, like who was going to die first, them or me, given, how long they live and all that. But I didn't think that quite through. And then I thought, I don't know if I could do that, but there are a lot of places that I want to go see, a lot. What better way to go see the world, if you're a motorcycle rider or anything really, but what better way to see the world than to see it on a motorcycle, going down paths that most tourists would never go down, having experiences that are truly adventures, like the guide making a wrong turn and ending up in some winery guy's backyard, which they weren't too happy that 12 motorcycles pulled in. But, you know, the guide spoke Italian, so of course, this was not on your trip, Rob, obviously, but it was a great little adventure. And I've seen places that I've wanted to get to without having to spend 3 or 4 days there. I get bored easy. Rome is great. 1 or 2 days in Rome was great. We did a great tour there, right? Florence, the same thing. You see enough to get a taste. If you want to go back, you could always make plans to go back because there was something there that that really, you know, hit you. But what better way to see the world than to do it on a motorcycle?
I'm in full agreement there.
And you're doing it for a living. So hooray for you.
Yeah,
a little envious.
I'm into photography. I'll climb up or under or into something, and Rob has seen it, and Gretchen. And it's like, why are you going there? And my line is, because everybody's taken the picture where you're standing from. Very few people have taken the picture from where I'm standing from. Maybe nobody, probably somebody. But yeah, I don't want that picture. I can go online and download it. I want this picture.
That's a great statement.
And if I fall and die, please get the camera, download the image. That's all I got, Robbie.
That's all I got. Would you like to add anything, Karen?
I know you didn't ask me to do this. Oh, wait a second. Hey, Ken, are you listening? I think I have something in my pocket for you. That's not what I was going to say, though. No, I was just going to say that I enjoyed your tour for a lot of reasons. And I think, you know, you've got a client for life here, because just the way you plan it and the fact that you have different routes, and you did, at least on our trip, such a great job with the itinerary and pointing out all of the sites to see and explaining all of them at the morning briefing to say, if you want to go here, you can do this. Of course, everybody did the same thing you did every day. I don't think Jem and Ali diverted at all. I mean, they went on their own and slept a lot in fields apparently, but they always met us for lunch. But you have low bikes, which I think is unusual for some tours. They have standard bikes with low seats, but I kind of like that you have lowered bikes or bikes that fit my inseam. And that's really good. And you guys as owners, operators, I mean, you take a vested interest in everything. You're there, and you really did a really great job taking care of everything and making me feel welcome. So Thank you.
Cool. Well, it was our pleasure to be traveling with you, and I'm looking forward to doing it again. All right. Well, hey, next week, Mike, I think that we should get Randy Newman and Short People on here.
There you go.
And if Randy Newman won't show up, we'll at least get a short guy.
Can we play that song, Short People or People Too? I don't know. It's from the 70s, more your era than mine.
Yeah, I think we can do that. Yeah, but we're going to get Ben McAmer to join us for some discussions on choosing the appropriate motorcycle for a tour.
It's a great idea, because we get that question often. I certainly have for friends. If I went, what would I ride? And we've talked about it a little bit today, because it's an important decision.
Thanks so much for joining us, Karen, and taking the time. I love your insights and your perspective on the world. It's great.
It was my pleasure to talk to you guys today. Thank you.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. You know, if this COVID thing lasts much longer, I might run out of stories, but I'm not going to run out of drinks to have.